This is Cosmographia, the Randall Carlson podcast.
So in a recent article that came out in Quaternary International, which is one of the journals that I regularly like to read, an investigator by the name of Pat Shipman, this came out in 2015, Quaternary International deals with any events having to do with the Quaternary, which was basically from 2.6 million years ago until today. So the Quaternary would encompass the Holocene and the Pleistocene. The beginning of the Quaternary is the Pleistocene, which, if you listen to some of my older lectures, I'm giving the date of 1.6 million years for the beginning of the Quaternary. This is the Quaternary period. The period is subdivided into epochs. The Quaternary consists of two epochs, the Pleistocene and the Holocene. We're now in the Holocene and have been for 11,600 years, right? But the Quaternary, in my older lectures, I'm talking about it being dated at 1.6 million because this was, 20 years ago, this was the duration that was accepted in the literature and so on. However, new research has pushed its age back by 1 million years. And what defines the Quaternary, I think, more than any other single thing, is the beginning of this oscillation between glacial interglacial ages. That's the thing that really characterizes the Quaternary and the Pleistocene. So you have Quaternary, which is the period. It's broken into two very asymmetrical epochs. The Pleistocene, which lasted from 2.5 million years ago down to 11,000 years ago, and then the Holocene. So one of the legitimate questions is are we really out of the ice ages? Are we into something completely different now?
Because it's unusually stable.
What's that?
Because it's like unusually stable. But
yeah. The Holocene has been unusual, and as we have looked at the ice core graphs, I mean that's clear to see there the difference between Quaternary and Holocene.
Right.
But yeah, so the Quaternary now has been pushed back to 2.6 million years, which I find to be interesting. Why is 2.6 million years interesting? That would be 2,600,000 years, right? 2.6 million. What happens if you divide that by 100? You get the precessional cycle of 26,000 years. So the Quaternary, you could basically say, is 100 precessional cycles almost precisely.
Wow.
And if, going back to Hamlet's Mill that we talked about, in some of the earlier episodes, who define the archaic concept of the great year is primarily the precessional cycle, the changing of the 26,000 year cycle of changing pole stars, the movement of the 26,000 year movement of the equinoxes and the solstices through the plane of the ecliptic, right? 26,000 years. So that to me becomes a very useful mnemonic. You simply multiply that by 100 and now you've got the length of the Quaternary. And this idea that something happened 100 great years ago, right? That caused a major shift from the extended warmth of the Pliocene into this glacial interglacial dance that's been going on ever since. So, yeah. Then you've got the possibility of a 26 million year cycle in the extinction. What did you see, my puppy?
Yeah, we just saw the tail.
A flag.
Oh, the tail.
We heard the door open and then the flag went by.
White flag went by behind.
Yeah, so I'll before our next episode, I'll go out and shoot these dogs so they don't interrupt us anymore.
No, those dogs.
No, I couldn't even. No, these are. I have wonderful dogs.
Yes,
they're very sweet. They're good guardians, but extremely sweet.
They're huge.
Yeah.
They're massive dogs.
They're the kind of dogs. They're the kind of dogs you would want to have if you were living in the world with Pleistocene lions and giant cave bears.
Right. Great.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we're at an hour, so we're gonna wrap it up.
I mean, but it's exactly 1 hour.
Exactly 1 hour. Like one of these days, we can actually exactly on the hour.
Well, thanks for reminding me. I think we should go a little bit further.
No problem.
Don't lose the track of the 26 million there, and then it'll go up one more scale too, won't it?
Well, then you got 260 million years. That's very close to the estimated time of a galactic rotation.
Oh.
So is this coincidence, or are we looking at some kind of
plan
synchrony here that links things by powers of 10? I don't know.
Mm.
I don't know the answer to that, but nonetheless, it's to me very interesting. And so this idea of this 26,000 year great year cycle becomes a useful tool, if you will, to help comprehend these larger cycles of change. And whether or not there's any coincidence there or not, I'm not claiming that there's anything other than coincidence. But then again, I don't know. That synchrony may have some root in some kind of harmonization of cycles on a cosmic level.
So wait, the rotation of the galaxy is 10,000 precessional cycles, basically, or is that right? Because you got 100 at 2.6 million, and then you said 260 million.
Yeah.
One trip around the.
I think it's 1,000.
The galaxy.
What did we say?
Yeah. It'd be 10,000.
Yeah.
10,000.
10,000 great years.
Yeah.
It's starting to sound like a day of Brahma.
A day of Brahma.
Yeah. What is that?
Well, and which brings up, not to digress into that, but certainly when we begin to look at some of these ancient traditions and we find these phenomenally long cycles of time, we're going, oh, wait a second. These guys are thinking terms that really are almost modern in the sense,
Right.
The idea that the world is 432 billion years old.
Yeah.
Which comes out strikingly close to the 450 or 4.5 billion. 4.32 billion years old, the age of the Earth in the Vedas, which is very close to the 4.5 billion estimate for,
Science, yeah.
Exactly. Right. That's what I'm trying to say.
And the 4.32 billion years is one day of Brahma, isn't it? That's what that is.
Yeah, I think that's what that is. Yeah. And then of course you've got, since we're talking about the yugas, we'll throw this out there for a second. You've got within that hierarchical scale, you've got, if you go and you look at the Sumerian king lists, the sum total of the 10 Sumerian kings is 432,000 years, the total number of reigns, right? And each one of the reigns as basically coming through the tradition, and we'll devote a segment to this, is one of these cosmic numbers that we've been talking about. One of these that I call them the Vedic numbers, these numbers that recur over and over again that all add up and reduce to 9, right? All these multiples of 9, right? Yeah. But if you look at them, they're built on this ternary scale, if you want to call it that, where it's pyramidal, right? And you've got the Kali Yuga, which is 432,000 years in the Vedas, which interestingly, so it's like the Sumerian king lists talk about these ages that are measured in tens of thousands of years. They sum to 432,000. And then you get the Vedas, and it picks up the range from there, and it extends the range into hundreds of thousands of year cycles, right? It's almost as if the Sumerian king lists and the Vedic numbers are essentially part of this continuum.
Yeah, a complete set.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so you've got the Kali Yuga, which is 432,000 years, and then you've got the Dwapara Yuga, which is twice that, 864,000. And then you've got the Treta Yuga, which is 3 times that, or 1,296,000. And I'm sure at this moment, everybody listening is pulling out their calculators and checking my numbers here. But if you go 3 times 432,000, you get 1,296,000, right? So now you have this Treta Yuga, it's 1,296,000 years, right? Well, go ahead and divide that by 50. And what do you get? Are you doing it?
I'll try it.
All right. It's in your hands, Russ.
1296.
Yeah.
1,296,000 years in the Treta Yuga cycle, which comes from thousands of years ago, the Vedic tradition.
Yeah. So divided by 50, it's 25,920, which is exactly.
Yeah, so they have this recognized grand cycle of time that turns out to be 50 precessional cycles. Is that coincidence? Again,
so that's half of the what you were just saying.
Half of the Quaternary
Quaternary
period.
period.
That's one half the Quaternary period, or is it the
no, that's right.
One? Yeah.
Quaternary.
Yeah. It's half the Quaternary.
Wow.
Exactly. It's half the Quaternary. That's right. Because double that is you get to 20, what did I say? 25,920,000. No, 2.59 million. That's what we're trying to get to. Which I'm rounding off to 2.6 million, which is the length of the Quaternary. I don't know if everybody was able to keep all that straight, but
numbers are hard when you're listening. So
when you're listening, exactly. But so anyways, let's get back to this for a few more minutes. So anyways, I was talking about this, when we're talking about mass kill sites, this Pat Shipman wrote in Quaternary International. That's how we got off on the Quaternary. This is a great journal. This is one of my favorites. I don't think you can find too much of this online because, again, I use the library resources for this, but the title of the article is, How Do You Kill 86 Mammoths? Taphonomic Investigations of Mammoth Megasites. And here's what Pat Shipman says. Since the late 19th century, archaeological sites dominated by mammoth remains have been an important focus of research. A key question is how the bones of large numbers of mammoths, ranging from a minimum number of individuals of about 5 up to hundreds of individuals, were deposited in one place. Despite much investigation, the cause of death of mammoths in these sites has remained controversial. Here, for convenience, I refer to such sites as mammoth megasites. So we can incorporate that term into our vocabulary, mammoth megasites. Now, one of those mammoth megasites that Brad and I visited in our journey with Graham. What year was that, Brad?
That was 14.
Okay, 14. Yeah, we visited the Hot Springs Mammoth site in South Dakota, and this is a mammoth megasite. And I have pictures of us there. These were from a journal, but I actually need to update this and put my own and Brad's pictures in here. But yeah, so this was a mammoth entombment where, like it says, over 50 mammoth skeletons unearthed so far. And then I'm asking the question, gradual accumulation or sudden burial.
Well, what's the material that they're in?
Well, it's like a hard clay matrix. And sort of the official explanation is that there was a sinkhole and a mammoth wandered in and fell into the sinkhole and then couldn't get out. And then a few years later, another mammoth obliviously came up and fell into the same sinkhole. And this process continued for a period of time. However, not everybody agrees with that. And
you think?
And I think it was Larry Eigenbrod who wrote I probably have it right in here, the quote from him. He looked at it and said, well, he thought it was more consistent with a bloat and float scenario. Did you get that? Bloat and float. So in other words, you've got a bunch of drowned mammoths floating in water and they settle into this basin and then get covered in mud, and then the mud dries out and turns into this matrix in which they are now entombed and being excavated. And I find that far more plausible than the idea that some really dumb woolly mammoths just kept falling in the same sinkhole over and over again. So yeah, you can see there's like, and there may be double or triple the number because the excavations are only in a limited area. And interestingly, when we were there, I was taking the tour, and the woman who is the guide is explaining the official. And I asked the question, I wanted to know, well, what estimates were there on the time frame because again, the assumption here in the gradualistic scenario is that these were individual events, maybe over thousands of years, right?
Right.
So I asked, what was the dating? Because it looks to me like the matrix in which they are was deposited in mass. And I asked her that question.
Yeah.
Because I said, well, if it was deposited in mass, then it was probably a sudden. And she got really, were you there, Brad? Did you hear that? How upset she got?
I don't remember
And how
specifically.
dismissive. Yeah, you might have been off with Graham or something at that point, but she really acted like she was offended at the question. And I was quite taken aback by it because I thought it was a very reasonable question. But she was basically giving this textbook explanation. And then I asked about the, how much time, do we have actual estimates of the time? Has there been radiocarbon dating done on these mammoth remains here that show that it was over a long period of time that they one by one got accumulated in this sinkhole? Or is it more like Larry Eigenbrod, and I think it was Larry Eigenbrod that was saying that it looks like you had a lot of carcasses floating in water that settled into this basin and then got covered in mud. And that just makes a whole lot more sense to me.
What are the green arrows pointing to on that picture, Randall?
Let's see.
There's two green arrows on the right.
Right at the right edge.
Yeah.
It's
not a big.
Don't recall what specifically that was.
This is where you put your brush.
This is where they need
and the buckets. Collect your buckets here.
I think that might have been it. Yeah. Put your
buckets go here. Yeah.
I don't have a map, but doesn't the topography kind of support that bloat and float also, Randall? Because there is kind of a shallow place and then a narrow gorge that water would have had to back up behind and then flow out through, so they would have gotten kind of deposited and sat down right there in that clay.
Exactly. And I think it'd be good to for the last few minutes to get into this story. Here's old Charles R. Knight again, one of my favorites. This is his 1908 painting. Kind of interesting, 1908, Tunguska. And here's the mastodon, not a mammoth. One of the ways you can tell the differences between a mammoth and a mastodon is the profile of the skull. The mastodon skull is much more receding. The mammoth skull tends to be much more vertical. And mastodons were browsers. They were found, they lived in forests and ate mostly tree branches, whereas mammoths were grazers who liked the open steppe land or savanna land where they could graze on grass, basically. So that was the difference between these major differences between these two distinct species of proboscideans. You can add this to your lexicon now.
That's why there's a web browser app called Mastodon. I never figured that out. Because they're browsers. I got it.
Okay. Okay. Interesting. How about that?
Yeah.
Okay, before we go on, Kyle.
Yeah.
Say the word proboscidean.
Proboscidean.
Yes, and you know what proboscis is? Your nose.
Schnoz.
Right.
Your schnoz, right, your schnoz. So proboscideans have big long schnozzes.
Okay.
I think that actually is the technical definition if you look. Long, extended schnozzes.
Schnozzes. That's right.
I was going to ask you if the mastodons, like when they're found, their remains are found, are they typically like in buried forests as well?
Well, yeah, they're found in areas that were forested. Yes, that's exactly right. And from studies of the remains in their stomachs and even like looking at mastodon coprolites, they can decipher the food that they were eating. And generally what you see is digested tree branches and the pollen of various trees and seeds and the things that they were eating was and they were endemic to forests, basically. Now this is not a very good image, but this is the Beresovka mammoth as he was found back in 1902, I believe was the year. And cropping out from a collapsed, some collapsed permafrost. You see this cliff here collapsed onto, and then revealed this guy sitting here, basically. So picture he's buried under here, and then the soil falls away and reveals him sitting here, right? And what you're looking here at is the skull, and this is the left forelimb right here.
Wow.
So this is basically how he was found. You can see here the forelimb here is here, and then here's his back foot. Whoops, what you see, let's see, can we see that? Yeah, you see part of it right here. This next one is a better photograph. You see the back leg here, the front forelimb, the skull, right.
Wow.
So, and see, he was found on his haunches like this, and as I explained, his hip bones were broken, as if he was slammed back onto his haunches with great force. So some of the interesting circumstances surrounding this guy, which we'll look at right here, okay? He weighed approximately 6 tons. The contents of the stomach were not putrefied, so the carcass must have frozen completely in 10 hours or less to prevent putrefaction. Flowering plants among the stomach contents indicate some fairly mild climate, perhaps autumn, fairly high temperature at the time of death, approximately 50 degrees Fahrenheit or more. The temperature required to freeze a 6-ton mammoth in less than 10 hours is approximately 100 to 150 degrees below zero. Had to have remained completely frozen from the time of death to the time of exhumation. Mammoth sitting on haunches, both hip bones broken, indicating that the animal must have been thrown back violently. Burial must have been instantaneous to prevent decay of carcass. Erect penis indicates rapid suffocation under pressure. So interesting circumstances that don't fit the gradualist paradigm and are completely inconsistent with death by human predation. And there have been many examples. This is, was it Dima, the name of this baby woolly mammoth that was found mummified in the permafrost? Here we go. This was a great article that came out back in 1962, back in the heyday of strict gradualism. And it was an independent researcher by the name of Harold D. Lippman published this in the journal Science about the finding of these repeated findings of frozen mammoths. In an earlier issue of Science, paleontologist William R. Farrand made a valiant attempt to salvage the gradualistic position vis-a-vis the frozen mammoths. But these fossils of the Siberian permafrost present an insuperable difficulty for a theory of slow, gradual geology. Baron Cuvier, one of the most critical observers of these remains, insisted that they were frozen suddenly. He wrote, "It is well known that its tusks are still so well preserved in cold countries that they are used for the same purpose as new ivory. And as we have before remarked, individuals have been found with the flesh, skin, and hair which had been frozen since the final catastrophe of the globe." And then William R. Farrand, who was a strict gradualist, responded to this by this comment right here. "It is not logically sound to postulate a major catastrophe on a scale far beyond anything we have experienced to explain geological phenomena, which can be adequately explained by the everyday processes which we can observe around us." So I like that. So it is not logically sound to postulate anything beyond what we've experienced, Right. Is it really? Or is it not logically sound to assume that everything that's happened in the history of the earth is just comparable to what we've observed in the last 2 centuries? That the last 2 centuries is representative. See, what is really more logically sound here?
Yeah, on a planet that's supposed to be 4 billion years old, you think that everything you've seen in the past 200 years is the same? It's just ridiculous.
4 billion? I thought it was 6,000.
Get out of here, Catholic.
Well, you're a Catholic, Mike.
No. I'm joking. Of course.
Yeah, so we've got some interesting, these are just typical of the kinds of finds that occur over and over and over again. This was like from an old journal, circa 1929. Skulls of mammoth, super bison, and American lion found during placer mining operations in Alaska. Here's remains of an extinct bison found in frozen muck near Fairbanks, Alaska. And here is one of my favorite guys of all who has written about the terminal Pleistocene extinction. This is Dr. Frank C. Hibben. He was an anthropologist, naturalist, and outdoorsman. And he was one who actually went and followed the placer mining operations, which are using these high pressure hydraulic hoses to blast away the permafrost. Yeah. So yeah, here this is an example of
Muck.
The muck, the frozen muck.
Muck
to get to the gold deposits, right? So he went along with these guys to see what kind of stuff they were uncovering as they're blasting away at this frozen permafrost. Now there's been an effort to discredit Hibben, again, by the same crowd that wants to bury the whole idea of catastrophic extinction, right? Now, in Magicians of the Gods, Graham Hancock does a great job of debunking the debunkers, debunking the detractors of Frank C. Hibben and how they manipulated, basically tried to, attack him. Of course, he's gone now, but to smear his reputation in order to discredit what he discovered and reported on. And we're gonna end with that tonight. I'm gonna just quote a little bit from Frank C. Hibben's work, The Lost Americans. And this is what the gradualists and the proponents of human-caused predation have attacked, because this is completely, again, his eyewitness testimony is completely inconsistent with the gradualist paradigm. And again, like I said, there have been, if you go online, you'll find several attempts to discredit Hibben. And again, Graham Hancock does a great job of addressing those attempts to discredit Hibben and his observations and his reporting on those observations. And here's a sample of what he says. The Pleistocene period ended in death. This was no ordinary extinction of a vague geological period which fizzled to an uncertain end. This death was catastrophic and all-inclusive. The large animals that had given the name to the period became extinct. Their death marked the end of the era. But how did they die? What caused the extinction of 40 million animals? In this particular case, and now again, he's reporting from what he has witnessed himself from these placer mining observations. In this particular case, the death was of such colossal proportions as to be staggering to contemplate. Who or what killed the Pleistocene animals is a query that has not yet been answered. The corpus delicti of the deceased in this mystery may be found almost anywhere. Their bones lie bleaching in the sands of Florida and in the gravels of New Jersey. They weather out of the dry terraces of Texas and protrude from the sticky ooze of the tar pits of Wilshire Boulevard in Los Angeles. Thousands of these remains have been encountered in Mexico and even in South America. The bodies lie as articulated skeletons revealed by dust storms or as isolated bones and fragments in ditches or canals. The bodies of the victims are everywhere in evidence. In spite of the indications that a few animals escaped the tragedy, there is no doubt that the major portion of the great animals of the Pleistocene met their end at the same time. And it might appear at first that many of these great animals died natural deaths. That is, that the remains that we find in the Pleistocene strata over the continent represent the normal death that ends the ordinary life cycle. However, where we can study these animals in such detail, such as in the great bone deposits of Nebraska, we find literally thousands of these remains together. The young lie with the old, foal with dam, and calf with cow. Whole herds of animals were apparently killed together, overcome by some common power. Interspersed in the muck depths, and sometimes in the very piles of bones and tusks themselves, are layers of volcanic ash. There is no doubt that coincidental with the end of the Pleistocene animals, at least in Alaska, there were violent volcanic eruptions of tremendous proportions. And then in addressing the matter of the frozen carcasses that were constantly turning up, he points out that it stands to reason that animals whose flesh is still preserved must have been killed and buried quickly to be preserved at all. Bodies that die and lie on the surface soon disintegrate, and the bones are scattered. Throughout the Alaskan mucks, there is evidence of atmospheric disturbance of unparalleled violence. Mammoth and bison alike were torn and twisted as though by a cosmic hand in godly rage. In one place, we can find the foreleg and shoulder of a mammoth with portions of the flesh and the toenails and the hair still clinging to the blackened bones. Close by is the neck and skull of a bison with the vertebrae clinging together with tendons and ligaments of the chitinous covering of the horns intact. There is no mark of a knife or cutting implement. The animals were simply torn apart and scattered over the landscape like things of straw and string. Mixed with the piles of bones are trees, also twisted and torn and piled in tangled groups, and the whole is covered with the fine sifting muck, then frozen solid.
God.
What a portrait. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that is amazing. What? So
Also reminds me of
where did
Earth and Upheaval is where I've heard that.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
you're reading from this guy's writing. Was it a book or a paper?
Yeah, The Lost Americans.
Getting it?
Getting
it. Yeah. So he was one of the few scattered catastrophists, in the mid 20th century. I think this book was written it was definitely the 40s. I think it was 1946. Think it was published in 1946. Not 100% sure, but somewhere around there.
I was going to say 52, but yeah.
Well, that could be.
Back in there. He's from New Mexico State University, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, this is what we're exploring. We're going to be getting into this further. We're going to be talking about the impact Younger-Dryas impact hypothesis. We're going to get people up to speed on that. So if you listen through the number of episodes that we devote to that, you should have a pretty solid working knowledge of where we're at, the state of understanding about that phenomena. I'm glad to hear that George Howards are going to come on and join us. He runs the website Cosmic Tusk. Really good source of information about all of these events we're talking about here. And yeah, we're going to be getting some other interesting guests too, I'm quite sure, in the near future. And we're also planning some perks and things for people that are helping us out in one way or another. For all the subscribers and Patreon contributors, we've got some pretty good juicy stuff in the pipeline that we're going to be making available soon.
Yes.
So
yes, thank you. Thank you to everyone who has joined the Patreon and support. We really appreciate that. Like Randall said, we're going to be getting perks. We're working on that. So we really appreciate you guys' support right now where there are almost none. But one of the good perks is that we will pay attention to your comments. Mm-hmm. We give priority to them, right? So if you are a Patreon supporter and you have questions, we read all emails and all comments, but the Patreon supporters get first priority. So that's one of the perks. It's already happening. So, so the website is patreon.com/Randall Carlson. Isn't that right, Brad?
Correct.
It is also, there's also a link to the Patreon on the website, Kosmographia.com, which that does work now. I made sure of that.
It's in the video descriptions, and it's also in the banner, little link on the Kosmographia YouTube channel. So plenty of ways to find us on Patreon.
Right.
And I'll make one final comment here. A lot of people have really seemed to be enjoying what we're doing. A lot of favorable comments. There's been a few critical of our format. I just want to make clear that I don't believe that academic pursuits and investigations like this should be dry. We should be having fun with it. Otherwise, why bother? And what you're seeing here is a collective effort. This is a team effort. Each person you see here is making a contribution to seeing that this happens. Without these guys, I wouldn't really be doing this right now. So keep that in mind before you start, tossing barbs our way about the format, that it might be a little too casual for your taste or whatever, because listen, that's the way we're going to do this. It's not meant to be a dry college classroom lecture. Right. It's more freewheeling than that, because, hey, that's the way we are. I can't help it. We're Hicks. OK, so
speak for yourself.
Well, yeah, I mean, with the exception of Mike, who, like I've said repeatedly, we keep him here so he can kind of have some measure of what normalcy really is.
Normalcy.
Right.
So
Mike is the
reference.
Yeah, Mike is the normal reference. Exactly.
Yeah, Mike is the normal guy here.
I'm the social scale man.
Exactly.
Yeah, you're wearing the striped shirt and everything, man. You're a great scale man.
That's right.
But I do have to agree with one of the comments that, and I don't know why this is, but you guys really do look shiny.
Yeah, we make sure that we're shining before we come in here to do
you guys like Kyle, maybe you can get your wife to put a little like powder on you or something before. Is that possible?
Too much cocoa butter there, guys.
We proudly adopt the title of Shiny People. We are the shining ones.
Okay.
Come to us for knowledge.
I like that better, the shining ones. If you start playing the Shiny People video, I don't know, I'm out of here.
Too many royalties.
Yeah.
That's right. We are the Anu, the shining ones.
Yeah. Come down.
But I don't have anything against REM, right? Because after all, they were the ones who sang "It's the End of the World as We Know It."
That's right.
Yeah. All right.
They're losing their religion.
That too. Yeah.
All right.
I'm totally cool.
Good show.
I'm totally cool with the criticism. Just support the show.
That's right. Criticize us all you want, but jump on Patreon.
Yeah, that's right.
Also, go to iTunes and give us 5 stars and tell us how much you hate us, but still 5 stars every time. And thanks to everybody that has done reviews. I'm keeping up with that, so that's going great. So thanks you guys so much for that.
Yeah. Thanks everybody.
Yeah.
5-star, Randall.
Yep.
All right, gentlemen. It's been great, and I'll see you next week, if not sooner.
Excellent.
All right.
Good night.
This is Kosmographia, the Randall Carlson podcast.